Hey there, safety fans, and welcome back to the Key Safety Talks YouTube channel for our daily safety chat. We always like to get into the nitty-gritty of OSHA, federal safety regulations. But sometimes those laws, they're just the tip of the iceberg, right?
Right, yeah. It's way more complicated than just that.
So it's kind of like we're stepping into a massive construction project,
Yeah.
and the foundation is those federal regs setting that baseline.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
But you can't just have a foundation, right?
No, you need the whole building.
We need framing and electrical and plumbing, all these layers.
All the layers all coming together to keep the building safe.
And so those layers represent the state and local laws, company policies,
Yeah.
and even all those voluntary standards from all kinds of organizations.
Right, and figuring out how it all fits together, that's really important.
It can be overwhelming, though, right?
For sure, especially for those of us in safety-critical industries.
So let's break it all down. We'll start with the foundation, with federal regulations. We always hear about OSHA, but what's their real role in all this?
Well, OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, they're kind of like the architect of our safety building. They create those big blueprints, for safety and health in the workplace, covering pretty much every industry.
So they make the big plan, but don't get into the details.
That's right.
So who does handle the details then?
Well, usually the states, they act like general contractors,
Yeah.
taking those federal blueprints and making sure they're followed on the ground.
Interesting. So that means there can be differences from state to state then?
Yeah, for sure. Think of it like regional building codes. You might need earthquake protection in California, but maybe not so much in Kansas.
Right.
Same with safety laws. Some states, they have more rules or tougher enforcement.
Now that you mention it, I have seen differences when I travel for work.
Exactly. Each state adds its own twist.
So that brings us to state and local governments. They have a lot of power over the specifics, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
I was looking at this table in our source material, and it's amazing how much stuff is covered by state and local safety laws, building codes, fire alarms, elevator rules, even things like fire exits.
It's all important stuff for sure. And it makes sense when you think about it. States and local governments, they're closer to their communities, so they know the local hazards and concerns.
So it's like adding those final touches, making sure everything's up to code.
Exactly. And even small details can make a huge difference for safety.
Like those fire exits you mentioned.
Right. In an emergency, that could be the difference between life and death.
Definitely. Okay, so we've got federal, state, and local levels. But what about the people actually working in this building? Do companies have any say in how things work?
Oh, of course. Companies are like the tenants in our safety building. They have to keep their own space safe, even going beyond those basic building codes.
So they want to keep their tenants safe, so to speak.
Right.
And sometimes those company rules are because of accidents that happen.
Yeah, that's right.
Remember that case we looked at about the worker injured on a tanker truck?
Yeah, that was a scary one.
It was something with a ladder, right? And no safety railing.
You got it. And that wasn't just about breaking federal rules. There were also problems with the company's safety procedures. Maybe even with the tanker truck's design.
So those small details can have serious consequences.
They sure can, and that's where company policies come in. They fill in the gaps and deal with specific hazards.
Like adding extra safety features.
Exactly.
Have you ever worked somewhere with really strict or weird safety rules?
Let me think.
Anything that really stood out to you?
Well,
Good or bad?
in college, I worked at this chemical plant. They were super strict about PPE, like full-body suits, respirators, the whole 9 yards.
Whoa, even for a simple task.
Even for simple tasks.
Huh.
At the time, I thought it was overkill. But now I see why they did it. They were dealing with some dangerous stuff.
Yeah, you don't want to mess around with that.
Nope.
Hmm.
So yeah, company-specific rules usually have a good reason.
Okay, so we got federal regulations, state and local codes, and those company rules. But what about those voluntary organizations we hear about? Where do they fit in all this?
Those are like the interior designers. They add style and function even though it's not required.
So things like ANSI, the American
Yeah.
National Standards Institute, and ASTM International.
Right, those kinds of groups.
But those aren't laws, right? Companies don't have to follow them.
Nope. Think of them more as guidelines, recommendations from experts.
So why bother then if it's not mandatory?
Well, for one, it can help sell products. Imagine you're buying something. One product meets basic safety. The other one has the ANSI seal of approval.
I'd go for the ANSI one for sure.
Exactly. It shows they care about quality and safety.
Like a building with all the bells and whistles.
That's a good way to put it. And it's not just about looking good. Meeting those standards can reduce liability, improve efficiency, even open up new markets.
So it's good business and good safety.
Exactly. It's
All
a
right.
win-win.
Okay, so those voluntary organizations, they're adding those extra layers even though they're not the main builders.
That's right. And just like those finishing touches in a building, those standards can make a workplace safer and more efficient.
I like this analogy a lot. It really helps to see how it all fits together.
Me too. But let's be real here. Navigating all this can be really tough. Like trying to find your way through a maze of rules and best practices.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to keep track of.
That's why we're here, though, to help you navigate this world.
And to give you the tools you need to build a safer workplace.
So if you're feeling a little lost, don't worry, we've got you covered. Stick with us as we break down each layer of our safety building and share some tips for making your workplace safer and more resilient. I know, thinking about this whole safety structure thing makes me think we got to prioritize.
Right.
Just like in construction, you can't do everything at once. You got to focus on the riskiest stuff first.
That's true. It's easy to get lost in the rules and forget the big picture. So how do we figure out what to focus on first?
It's all about risk prioritization.
Risk prioritization.
Okay, it's like a triage system for safety hazards.
Interesting. Tell me more about that.
We can't treat every hazard the same. We got to figure out how likely something is to go wrong and how bad it'll be if it does. Then we can focus on the biggest threats.
But isn't that subjective, though? What seems risky to one person might not seem so bad to someone else.
Yeah, that's why we need a system of framework. One tool that's really helpful is the risk prioritization matrix. It helps you see the link between how likely something is and how bad it could be.
Okay, and how does that work?
Think of a graph, all right? On one side, you've got the likelihood from rare to almost certain, and on the other side, you've got the severity from minor to catastrophic. Each combination goes into a different category on the matrix, so you can see which risks need attention right away.
It's like if there's a fire in our building.
Yeah.
Even if the chance is low, but the damage could be huge, that would be a top priority, right?
Exactly. Even if it's unlikely, a fire could be devastating. So you'd focus on things like sprinklers and alarms.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about budgets and deadlines? Don't companies sometimes have to choose between safety and saving money?
Yeah, that's a good point. In a perfect world, we'd fix everything. But in reality, we have to make tough choices.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to understand the risks and get everyone involved in making those decisions.
So it's about communication and finding that balance.
Exactly. And that's where having a strong safety culture comes in. Everyone needs to understand safety and feel comfortable speaking up.
So it's more than just following the rules.
It's about taking responsibility for safety together.
Now let's switch gears a bit and talk about the why behind all this. What's the real reason for all these rules and regulations?
Well, the main thing is to prevent accidents and keep people safe, right?
Right.
But it goes beyond just preventing accidents.
Okay, how so?
Well, think about it. When people feel safe at work, they're more productive. They're not worried about getting hurt. And they take pride in their work.
So safety actually makes businesses better.
It does. And it's good for the economy, too. Less healthcare costs fewer workers' comp claims, lower insurance premiums.
So safety is good for business and for society.
Exactly. And it sends a message that we care about people.
That's important. And, technology is changing things too, right? There's so much new tech that can make workplaces safer.
Absolutely. Things like wearable sensors that can tell if you're tired, or AI systems that can spot hazards in real time. It's really exciting stuff.
So it's not just about rules anymore. It's about using technology to prevent accidents before they happen.
Right. It's about being proactive instead of reactive.
But new tech also brings new challenges,
Mhm.
right? Like making sure it's used responsibly and ethically.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
We got to be careful about things like data privacy and making sure these systems are fair to everyone.
But we need to be thoughtful about how we use this stuff.
For sure.
Okay, so let's go back to those different layers of regulations. It can be really overwhelming, especially for people new to this.
Yeah. Can be a lot to take in.
Any advice for our listeners who are feeling lost?
Well, first off, don't be afraid to ask questions. Talk to your coworkers, your boss, or experts in your industry. People are usually happy to help.
Good advice. What about things like professional groups and trade associations?
Those are great resources, too. They have expertise in specific industries. They can tell you about the standards and best practices.
So like if you're in construction, you'd talk to the Associated General Contractors.
Yeah, exactly. And remember, safety is a journey, not a destination. You don't become a safety expert overnight. Take it one step at a time, and don't be afraid to ask for help.
That's encouraging. It's about building that safety knowledge over time.
Right, and as you learn more, It's important to understand why the rules
Yeah,
exist.
look, what's the point of a fire escape if no one knows how to use it?
Exactly. So let's talk about training and education.
Okay, good idea. It seems like training is often rushed or just a formality.
Yeah, it shouldn't be like that. Good training should be engaging and relevant to people's jobs. It should give them the skills to stay safe.
So more than just sitting through a presentation,
Right. It should be interactive and help people understand the why.
and that leads to a safer workplace for everyone.
Exactly. Now, before we move on, remember that tanker truck case we talked about? It's a good example of how small details can cause big problems.
Yeah, let's look at that again and see what we can learn. If I remember right, it was about a worker getting hurt on top of the tank,
Right. He was trying to climb a ladder, but there was no safe way to get to it.
like a missing platform or handrail.
Exactly. And he fell and got hurt.
That seems like an obvious hazard. So why wasn't it fixed?
Well, there were general rules about ladders and falls, but there wasn't a specific rule for that type of access on tanker trucks.
So a loophole in the rules.
Kind of. But they also looked at industry standards, from the Association of Truck Trailer Manufacturers.
Yeah, what did they say?
They had guidelines for tanker truck access, but they were just suggestions, not actual rules.
So it was up to the manufacturers to decide what to do.
Exactly. And in this case, it looked like they chose to save money. Instead of building a safe platform for the ladder,
So they cut corners and someone got hurt.
sadly, yeah. And this shows that even with rules and standards, there's always room for interpretation and human error.
It's a reminder that safety is about more than just rules on paper.
Right. It's about creating a culture where everyone is looking out for hazards.
So what happened after the accident? Did anything change?
Yes, luckily, the worker sued the trucking company and the manufacturer. And while we don't know the exact outcome, the incident did lead to some changes in the industry.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. What kind of changes?
Well, the Truck Trailer Association updated their standards for tanker truck access. They made them more specific and enforceable.
So they closed that loophole.
Exactly. And a lot of manufacturers started building safer trucks, with those platforms for the ladders.
It's sad that it took an accident to make it happen. But at least something good came out of it.
That's true. And this shows that safety rules are always evolving. They change based on what we learn from accidents.
Like a continuous improvement process.
Exactly. And it takes everyone working together, industry government workers and safety professionals.
We all have a part to play.
That's right.
Okay, so let's focus on one of the big players in all this. Government agencies, specifically OSHA, and how they enforce the rules.
Okay, good idea. OSHA gets a bad rap sometimes, but they're essential for setting those basic safety standards.
Yeah, people think of them as the bad guys.
But
they're just trying to make sure workplaces are safe.
exactly. So let's talk about what they do, how they do it, and why it's so important for keeping workers healthy and safe.
All right, OSHA 101. Let's do it. Okay, so OSHA, they're like the building inspectors, making sure everyone's following the rules.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. OSHA's all about making sure work is safe for everyone in the U.S.
Right.
They set and enforce standards, they provide training, and they try to encourage everyone to keep getting better at safety.
So OSHA's like making sure the foundation's strong and the wiring's not going to cause a fire.
Exactly. They can do inspections, investigate accidents, and even give out fines if people aren't following the rules.
Like the safety police.
Right.
And those OSHA standards, they cover all kinds of stuff, right?
Oh, yeah, everything from falls to chemicals to machinery.
So they're making sure our safety building's up to code.
And those standards are always changing, too, as we learn more about hazards and new technologies.
Keeping everything up to date.
Exactly. And it's not just about reacting to problems. OSHA also does a lot of training for employers and
Yeah.
employees.
So they're teaching people how to build things safely in the first place.
Right. That's a big part of what they do. They want workers to be able to spot hazards before they cause accidents.
Now, some people think OSHA is just a bunch of paperwork and red tape.
Yeah, I've heard that.
But there's a human side to this too, right?
Absolutely. Before OSHA existed, workplace deaths and injuries were way more common.
Really?
Yeah, OSHA was a turning point for safety. It's made a huge difference in the number of accidents and deaths.
So those rules, those inspections, they're actually saving lives.
They are. Every standard, every inspection, every training session, it's all about protecting workers and making work safer for everyone.
Sometimes we forget that it's all about people in the end.
We do. And speaking of protecting people, let's talk about communication. It's not enough to just have rules. You got to make sure people understand them and follow them.
Right, like what good is a fire escape if nobody knows how to use it?
Exactly. We need to make sure everyone feels safe, informed, and knows what to do.
So what does good communication look like then?
Well, you got to have clear safety procedures that everyone can understand. Think of it like the instruction manual for our safety building.
Right. Everyone needs to know how to use the building.
But it's more than just having the manual. You got to make sure people are actually reading it and using it.
So things like safety meetings and
Mm.
updates from management.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Making safety part of the everyday conversation.
And it's got to be a two-way conversation, right? Workers need to be able to speak up if they see something unsafe.
Absolutely. They should feel comfortable reporting hazards and suggesting improvements.
So it's about open communication and working together.
Exactly. And that helps build trust and accountability.
Because if people trust that their concerns will be taken seriously, they're more likely to report things before they become accidents.
That's right. It's like having a team of safety inspectors always on the lookout.
And they need to be able to report what they find so someone can fix it.
Exactly. Communication is key.
So it's not just talking, it's about actually taking action to make things safer.
Right. And that leads us to accountability.
Accountability, huh? That sounds kind of serious.
Well, it is, but in a good way. It just means that we're all responsible for our actions, and there are consequences if we don't work safely.
Like a system of checks and balances.
Yeah, to make sure everyone's doing their part.
But it's not about blaming people or being punitive, right?
No, it's about creating a culture where everyone understands safety is important, and we all take responsibility for our own actions.
So it's a team effort.
Exactly.
Hmm.
We all work together to build a safer and healthier workplace.
Well, I think we've covered a lot today, from different types of rules to risk assessment to communication and accountability.
We have. And I hope our listeners have a better understanding of how safety works and how important it is for everyone to be involved.
Me too. And remember, safety is a journey. It never really ends. There's always more to learn and new challenges to face.
That's true.
But if we work together, communicate, and hold each other accountable, we can create a future where everyone feels safe at work.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for joining us today on Key Safety Talks. And remember, safety starts with you. Stay safe out there.